All right, let me set up the camera here. Okay, I think we're good. And so I don't think I'm gonna be able to live stream properly because on the channel that I want to, because it's not letting me. So I'm just gonna record it. But Zoom has
Um,
a recording option. Uh, are you really sleepy?
I've been sleepy all day.
How long do we have?
We've got as much time as we need.
Really?
Yeah.
But you have to work tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah, but not till 10.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, I'll just press record and we'll run with it. Do you have something to drink? Some tea or
Somebody's
some
making
water?
tea right now.
Really awesome. Okay. So I'm gonna press record. The sound is good, right? In the image.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right.
Let's see here. I can stream it. I can try at least.
No, it's okay. It's already streaming. I mean, you can do it on your side, whatever, but it's already done. And the most important thing is that I'm gonna record it. So, and it seems that you're hearing okay. I'm hearing okay and seeing okay. So that should be good. And then I can change. We can do the like speaker view. Maybe it's better. Or
Uh,
which view do you think it looks better?
I think this one's fine.
Like whoever speaking appears,
Yeah.
or the other one like that?
No, I think the whoever's speaking works
That
out
one,
the best.
that one is better.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, cool. So let's do it. Record on this computer, and it should be recording now. So we're good. We're
You're
good.
officially recording.
We're starting. Yeah, we're starting the first episode of Talking Movies, Ian,
Excellent. I'm excited for this.
of the new revived Talking Movies. Because I tried to do this with Ritem like 1 year ago,
Yeah.
and we did 3 episodes, and it didn't really go anywhere. So I'm excited to do this. So today we're going to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I think is from 1981.
Yeah, it came out in 1981. The movie takes place in 1936. I'm doing a little research here as we
Nice.
have this discussion. I've got the Wikipedia page up.
Awesome.
Let's see here.
Setting up my tea here. Ian's girlfriend is setting up his tea. Getting our teas ready for our movie discussion.
Yeah, so we just watched it. So what did you think? Like,
And it's
start out on like a
fantastic.
scale of 1 to 10.
1 to 10.
Or 0 to 100. I like that one better.
1 to 100.
You've got 0 also.
Okay.
Like, this movie
I would say I'll give it an 85. 85. Maybe
85, huh?
86 or 7, you know. Let's say 87. 87.
I would put this movie at a 73.
73. Okay, maybe I'm giving it too much because there's a nostalgia element to it, you know.
Okay.
So maybe 85 is good.
Sure.
Maybe
Did you
85.
grow up watching this movie? Did you watch it as a kid?
Say it again, sorry, Ian.
Did you watch it? Did you watch this movie as a kid? Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I have, yeah. I must have watched this movie for the first time. It was probably when I was 10 or 11, but I've since watched it a number of times. I think I've watched this movie probably like 3 or 4 times, maybe 5. And it's interesting because I always forget most of the movie. So when I watched it again, it's like I'm watching the movie for the first time.
It still has a lot of value to it.
Yeah, and I don't know why. Some movies I just remember, most of the things that happened during the movie, but not with this movie. For some reason, I kind of forget. I think that the most important thing of the movie for me, it's not so much the plot. It's kind of like just the excitement. It's like an adventure. I like that feeling of, oh man, Indy is gonna go on an adventure, And
Yeah, I
I
mean, it
I know.
definitely comes off as just like a pure fun adventure movie.
Yeah, yeah, that's I think that's exactly what it is. And well, what I was like saying is that about me not remembering the whole movie. I do remember the beginning very well and the ending very well, but kind of the middle, I kind of always forget a little bit. So it's almost like watching a new movie every time.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't
the
know why.
movie is like it's definitely an iconic classic, and I think that's something I'm gonna try and do this winter is watch through like classic movies, like movies that get parodied. They're so good.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, you had never seen this movie before, but had you ever seen like that first scene? That first scene is super iconic.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like that scene, the first scene where he's getting chased by the boulder,
Hmm.
and swapping out the relic. Like that scene's been done countless times in parody and like, recreation. It's just kind of one of those things that you know without really ever having seen it directly. Um,
Yeah,
like the plot twist in episode 5 of Star Wars, like Luke, I am your father, which actually isn't a quote. Um, but like everybody knows that because it comes up in pop culture just so frequently. So it's definitely a scene that has a reputation to precede itself.
yeah, it's a super iconic scene. And you know, it's almost like it's like a mini movie, right? Because it's before the main story. It's like one of those. This is one of those movies that you have like a mini movie before the movie actually starts. It's like a preview, like a short film.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it definitely like gives you a taste of what you're getting into. And I think without having a lot of character development, you get a lot of you get a flavor for what Indiana Jones is going to be, and like what kind of character he will be throughout the rest of the movie. Right? Like it starts at the end of what could be an entire other Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, for sure. And
I think that doesn't happen that often, or it's just a really good way to set up into just an adventure movie and really help stretch out, like the feeling of thrill right from the beginning and get it all the way into the
yeah, it's really exciting. So you got your tea there, I can see.
end. Green tea,
Mint tea,
no green, because anything else will keep me up.
green tea.
What kind of tea are you drinking?
I'm drinking, you know, I think it's some sort of green tea as well, but I added a little bit of cream to it because I like it better that way.
I've never had
I
tea
would
with
show it to
cream.
you, but I would probably,
Yeah, don't spill.
yeah. So
Yeah, I've never put cream in my tea or honey. No, I've put honey in, but I've never put in cream or milk.
yeah, I like it better. You know, when I lived in England, I developed this taste. I acquired the taste for you know, the way they drink it with with milk, with some milk and some sugar. And I don't have milk at home right now, so that's why I'm using cream. But man, this is exciting because it was your first time watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. Had you ever seen any other Indiana Jones movies before?
No. I think I might have seen a few like back in the day when my dad would watch them on TV. Because my dad just was constantly in front of the television when I was a child, and
Yeah.
every once in a while he would call me in and be like, "You gotta watch this movie. It's a classic." And he'd be like halfway through the movie, and I'd just like sit down awkwardly and just like watch parts of it with commercials in between. So I might have seen another Indiana Jones movie via that medium, but this is the first time I've ever intentionally sat down to
So
consume an Indiana Jones film.
yeah, so basically now it's gonna be maybe we're gonna have to watch all the Indiana Jones movies then.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we can do all of them. There was one that came out as early as 2007, I think, or like 2008. Because I remember a
yeah,
remake happened when I was in high school.
yeah, that's the yeah, that's the new one. and it's also the worst. What's it called? Like something the kingdom, Crystal Kingdom, or Crystal Skull, or something like that.
Yeah, something
And
about Crystal Skull.
yeah, and it's really it's not that great. The good ones are the first three, the ones from the 80s. Those
Hmm.
are the good Indiana Jones movies. The new one is, it's not that good. It's also it's a little bit weird because it's weird because it's like an old Harrison Ford, an old Indiana Jones. So it's weird because you have the three movies and he's like a young adventurer or like middle-aged adventurer, but a vital guy. And then the last one, it's him as kind of like a like an old man, sort of like old. And then um, Shia LaBeouf plays his kid, his son. So they were obviously setting him up to be like the successor of Indiana Jones, but I think the movie bombed so hard, people um, really didn't like the movie all that much. So I think they just decided that wasn't a good idea. And Shia LaBeouf, I mean, he's a okay actor, but I don't think he's like super popular.
Yeah, I definitely don't think a continuation of the Indiana Jones series with Shia LaBeouf would be really exciting. And I feel like the concept of like travel and adventure, because that's really what like Indiana Jones sells. It's like uh, traveling off to distant lands and being able to be an archaeologist and experience like all of these insane cultures. I feel like it's not the sort of thing that would cater, wouldn't play well to a modern day audience.
Well, why do you think that?
Um, I think cultural appropriation is far more of a hot button issue than when this movie came out. Um, I feel like it would be doomed to be sentenced to the death of a trope. Like people would already write it off as like, we know how this is going to go, and I just don't think it would be subversive enough to capture a new audience. But I could be totally wrong too. Um, like a lot of kids keep eating up things like Star Wars, and
Yeah.
I think I guess Indiana Jones had potential to be a brand, the way like Star Wars was. Because I wouldn't even call Star Wars a movie; I would call it a brand.
Right.
Um, but I guess I don't see that as much in this series. But I could change my mind, especially if we're gonna watch through all of them.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I think it would be cool to watch all of them, but um like what I was gonna say, they're gonna make the fifth movie though. They're gonna make Indiana Jones 5, but it certainly hasn't been as popular as Star Wars. But I mean, nothing is quite as popular as Star Wars. I mean, the first three Indiana Jones movies were pretty popular, and then they didn't get a sequel in the 90s, but neither did Star Wars really until they made the prequels in the late, very very late 90s. Um, and then I think part of the problem with Indiana Jones 5 is probably the fact that Harrison Ford is Star Wars. They could just use new characters, even though that didn't turn out so well, in my
Well,
opinion. But
I think Harrison Ford is effectively done acting. Like
well, and
so, like in
and
Star Wars Episode 7, there's a spoiler, but Han Solo gets killed, and Harrison Ford agreed to do the new Star Wars movies on the condition that he was only going to do the one. So that
Mhm.
was the only way for them to have him appear in Episode 7 and not in the rest of the series.
Yeah, and even if he wanted to do Indiana Jones 5, which I think he might appear in Indiana Jones 5, that's what I've heard, but it's just kind of like a complicated thing, like what you're saying, that maybe he's not super into it anymore. And just the fact that Indiana Jones is a pretty, he's not like an action hero, but there's a lot of action in those movies as well. So, he's what, almost 80 right now,
Yeah, he's an
Harrison
old
Ford.
man.
Yeah, so it's tricky. It's tricky to do that. But you know what? I think there's a lot of potential for Indiana Jones. I just think he should be a guy like James Bond. You just change the actor.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's like a good question. Is how does this movie define like the adventurous hero? Right. I think it does a lot to like set those expectations. Um, and just like this movie is very influential in that regard.
I think you're right, and I think that's why this movie really became so important because this is like the adventure movie from the '80s that defined adventure in the same way that movies like, but there's a bunch of them, Rambo, and um, what other adventure movie, action movies are there? Terminator.
I guess I
Uh,
would make a distinction between action movies and adventure movies.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That the action genre got lots of those like really big iconic movies, but the adventure movies we didn't get as many. But Indiana Jones is certainly the movie that kind of defined that genre, even though we didn't get that many adventure movies like that. There were some, but they were never quite as successful as those big action movies. And you know what? I think in video games, it actually got more of a continuation. If you think about, I was thinking, Tomb Raider or Uncharted. Those are really influenced
Oh yeah, they
by.
definitely have like heavy Indiana Jones vibes to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In when they made Tomb Raider, the whole idea, they were just trying to do Tomb Raider. It was basically Indiana Jones, but with the female who was British, and that was pretty much it. And it ended up becoming like this huge,
Its own series.
yeah, it's a huge series, and Lara Croft became a huge icon herself, and now Uncharted became, he's basically the American Indiana Jones in the 21st century. So
Right.
Indiana Jones really defined what adventure is in pop culture.
Let's see here.
And another thing, Ian, something that Beth pointed out, but I was already thinking about it actually. Um, I also noticed that the Nazis are the villains, and that is also something that became really popular in not just movies, but also a lot of video games. They have this. They're set in the 30s, and the Nazis are the villains. And I think that's Indiana Jones is not the first movie that Raiders of the Lost Ark is not the first movie that introduced that, but it's certainly one of the, like in modern history, in modern cinema, that's one of the first movies that had like prominent Nazi villains, and the whole storyline is that basically the villains trying to get some sort of powerful thing that's going to help the Nazis in the war. So that really raises the like the danger of the whole situation. That's why he really needs to stop them.
Yeah, I think it does a good job of lending themes of historical fiction to suspense.
Yeah.
Um, just as far as taking a backdrop that people are roughly familiar with and rolling with it. Right? Like, I have no idea if the Nazis ever literally sought out the Ark of the Covenant. Like, I hear all kinds of crazy things that they've done, especially in like history specials nowadays.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think it was at the time when they cranked out this movie, a really good concept.
Well, in the History Channel, they have a bunch of stuff, uh, conspiracy theories about the Nazis looking for like powerful weapons, and all kinds of crazy stuff related to the Nazis.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
bet
Nazi conspiracy theories are wild.
yeah.
So, like, I think the movie holds well because, like, for whatever reason, that chapter of history is really rife for uh, conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, I mean Nazis is, yeah, it's a very interesting setting. I don't know why they decided to. because it's a movie from the 80s. So if you think about it, it's kind of a weird setting, and the time and the place. Not so much the place, I guess, but just the fact that they chose to set the movie in the 30s and make the Nazis the villains. I'm not sure like what led to that decision. If they just decided to set it in the 30s and then thought, well, the Nazis are going to be the villains, or it was the other way around. They just wanted the Nazis. They just wanted to have Nazis, so it had to be set in the 30s and not the 80s.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a good question. I feel like
We should have Steven Spielberg here or George Lucas to ask them because I don't know.
yeah, that'd be dope. I'd talk to George Lucas.
All right, you ask him.
Pile of money. His infinite
Ask him if
pile
he
of
wants to
money.
show up in our next podcast. We can talk
Yeah,
about.
we'll get him on Twitter.
Yeah, we can get him on Twitter and ask him if he wants to talk about Star Wars next.
Yeah, I think Nazis in this movie definitely fall into a perfect fit as far as like a villain and a role because collectively the audience will agree that they're antagonists of that chapter of history. But more so, I think I think George Lucas and Spielberg really wanted to play on uh, like mid Atlantic kind of vibe. So this was the 30s, and when did international air travel happen? That was like the 1910s.
International air travel.
Yeah, so like being able to fly to a different country on an airplane. That was
Um, that's a
that
good
was around like
question.
the Howard Hughes era.
I
But
don't even know, man. I think the 1920s maybe or 30s, really.
right, but I guess to my point, I think you see a lot of inspiration to towards that like era, like the Greatest Generation era,
Hmm.
with like the transitions where they've got like the red line flying across the map, as they like travel across the globe.
Yeah, those sequences are pretty cool, don't you think?
Yeah, they're definitely like classic, and I think that does a great job of helping sell that movie as taking place in that era, especially with like the fashion, where they're like he's wearing like peak 1940s fashion.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so iconic, man. The way he's dressed, the whip, the hat. I mean, Indiana Jones is such an iconic character. It's really hard to create a character that is that iconic. But and now that you're one of the, you joined the club. Now you're an Indiana Jones fan
Perfect.
because you had never seen the movie before. But I
I feel
mean,
like it's a big
it's
club.
I'm gonna turn you into a great, big Indiana Jones fan because we're gonna watch the other movie. I don't need to do anything. I just need to show you the movies.
Yeah, so we've got three more to go to.
Three
Or
more
get
to
to.
go, or at least two. The ones from the 80s. I don't know if you should watch the last one. That's gonna make you less of an Indiana Jones fan. So
Wikipedia says that there is an untitled fifth film due out in 2022 that is in development under Disney, with James Mangold directing, Spielberg, Marshall, and Kathleen Kennedy producing, Harrison Ford returning to play the titular character, uh, George Lucas returning to executive produce, John Williams returning to compose the score. That's something else that I think really makes this movie a classic. Is
or
is the score,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like George Lucas, I think that's one of his signatures is creating a feeling of suspense through an orchestra,
Yeah,
right?
and
And like everybody knows that, like dun 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 dun.
yeah, I mean it's
Dun.
iconic.
Right?
It's
Like
like
it could be a
Star
ringtone.
Wars.
It's so popular.
It's like Star Wars. You couldn't have Star Wars without those little songs, the score basically, but those little moments that everybody knows, like the Star Wars song,
Right.
the Imperial March song, the Indiana Jones like dun dun
Yeah.
dun dun dun.
There, this reminds me of a clip on YouTube where somebody cut out the orchestra in the final scene of Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
when Luke, Leia, Han Solo, and Chewie are all like in the Imperial City, and they're like getting awarded medals, like walking down the aisle and everything. Somebody
Yeah.
cut all of the music out of that, so it's just quiet, and the scene is really weird and like really boring. Because it's just a bunch of people being quiet and shuffling through. And you have like no idea what's going on. So like the music is really what like secretly carries entire scenes on its back.
True. Yeah.
I think that's very much the case with this movie.
And don't you think like modern movies, they don't really have the same level of music, the same level of, they don't really have these scores anymore, don't you think?
I think some of them do, but it's definitely fallen out of practice.
Yeah, now I feel that they just basically, even like these big Hollywood productions, I mean, they're more expensive than they've ever been, uh, at least before the coronavirus thing. I mean,
Right.
they're making movies that cost $200 million, and but even though not all movies cost $200 million, but a lot of expensive movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see $1 billion movie in our lifetime. Like,
Yeah,
no question about it.
and
In
all
fact,
the
I think the Lion King remake. Hang on,
yeah, and all these expensive movies.
it was 2019. What did I search for? Budget.
Yeah, search the budget, but I mean, a lot of these movies, they don't really
Budget
have good
260
scores.
million.
How much?
260 million.
Wow. Was that the most expensive movie ever?
Uh, let's see here.
I mean, the amount of money that they've spent on making Avatar movies, it's crazy.
All right, this is a surprising one. Um, according to Google and Insider.com, the most expensive movie made is 2011's Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which cost a reported 376.5 million after a tax credit.
How much? 300. How much?
$376.5 million.
Wow. That's just the production.
And like, you know what? I couldn't name that movie. Like, if you're like, can you name all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies? I would just know Pirates of the Caribbean featuring Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Right? Like 2011 means it was one of the
Is that
sequels.
is that the third one?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the third one.
Whereas
Wait, on Stranger Tides, you said?
yes. Hang on.
I mean,
Yeah,
if it
on Stranger Tides.
oh, that's the fourth one. That's the fourth one.
Yeah, I didn't even know there were 4 of them.
Yeah, I think there's 5 of them.
That's a lot for
Yeah, it's a lot, but those movies are kind of like, I enjoy them. They're kind of like Indiana Jones. It's fun, fun adventure movies, and they're both owned by Disney now, and they both have Disneyland rides. So there's a lot in common.
this movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, again according to Wikipedia, had a $20 million budget.
Well, one of the things that you notice watching these movies is that definitely the special effects don't hold up all that well because, like in that final scene, which is a great scene, by the way, it's like an awesome final scene, even though
Oh
it
yeah,
looks
where all the
terrible.
Nazis' faces are getting melted.
Exactly, like melting people's faces, literally. I mean, that's something else, and the special effects are just horrible.
Honestly, I think I disagree because I mean, although they don't look as good as $100 million CGI movies of
Right.
today, um, I think they're still fun to look at.
No, they're definitely fun. They're definitely fun. I agree with that. It's just that it doesn't look very realistic, right? I mean, you wouldn't have those scenes in a movie today.
Yeah, but I think that's also like part of the charm of classic movies is that
Yeah, definitely,
um,
definitely. Yeah.
like you can watch it and it's a really entertaining thought to consider that like they actually had to film everything. They couldn't, render all of this in CGI. So like all of the explosions and the car chase scenes, like all of that, they actually had to like coordinate a film crew to film it, like they did in old action movies. Like, before you had special effects, you actually had to blow up a truck.
Yeah, and you definitely notice that in '80s movies, and that's cool. I mean, I think it gives them more. They have CGI these days, and I mean they kind of overdo it. They use too much CGI.
And I think it definitely shows because a lot of this movie still looks great, right? Like the
Yeah,
explosions, a lot of the action scenes, even like the environments, still look fantastic. Like the scene where he's in the pit of snakes, like they probably just bought a truckload of snakes.
yeah. I'm sure those are real snakes. They didn't
Oh,
have
totally.
CGI back then too. They couldn't have done it otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I bet it was probably cheaper to just buy a pit of snakes than to try and like rig up
Yeah,
rubber snakes.
I don't think they could, you know, have done it any other way really. But I bet it was a really scary scene to film.
Oh, totally. But I think that's also like what makes movies exciting and interesting, or at least like in the '80s that would have made it very interesting. Um, and honestly, I definitely like miss that era of movie making
I mean,
where
the '80s is great, man. The '70s, fantastic. The '80s, the '90s, to me, the best decade for sure, movie wise, is the '90s. I mean,
yeah,
they had,
I would say that's a pretty fair statement.
I mean, they were making fantastic movies in the '90s, left and right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this point of like critical mass when you get up to movies in about 2004 to 2005 when like Hollywood really started adopting CG as like a major movie making component.
Hmm.
Because like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies were still done, like with props and like on-set effects.
Yeah,
They had like fake sets that they would blow up, whereas nowadays everything is just a green screen.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, for sure it has changed. And I do think that movies look better for the most part these days when they make them. I mean, they have better special effects, they have better technology, but movies are not better. I mean, the stories. I mean,
No,
how
yeah, I
many
totally
movies
agree on
like
that.
yeah, how many movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark do you get these days? I mean, and this is before COVID, obviously. Now we don't get any movies, but
Right. Um, but yeah, I think there's a certain kind of novelty in a movie being made via puppets and on-set movie props. Like it really just gives a movie like its own kind of charm, which I think is why a lot of people really resent the Star Wars remakes, where George Lucas retroactively redid a lot of the special effects with CGI and replaced a lot of like the puppeteering.
yeah. But I'm okay with that. I mean, I know a lot of people have some problems with that, but the problem is that they keep making these Star Wars movies and they keep getting worse. I mean, that Star Wars is a good example. The '80s, you're having like these new, really cool movies that were very new at the time, and they were original, and they were really cool stories, and obviously they didn't look as good as the ones that they make today, but story wise, I mean, they were so much better. It's so much better to watch the old Star Wars movies rather than watching the new Star Wars movies that are just like a retread. They just keep doing the same thing again and again, but there's no soul and there's no real story anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about what Hollywood is doing these days, especially with trying to resuscitate series, especially series that like really don't need it.
Hmm.
Like with Disney trying to do a live action remake of like their like blue chip titles, like the Mulan movie, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. Like they're not great movies, and in a lot of ways they are a worse interpretation than source material.
I mean, yeah, they're for sure worse. I mean, they make those movies because they make money. I mean,
Right. And I think
that's
it's
the
like
only
it's definitely
explanation.
unfortunate. But I think it shows that movies aren't about um, they're not about producing a good movie that will continue to sell. They're about producing a movie that will inspire consumerism.
I think, yeah, and I don't know, like it's even hard to talk about movies now because with the COVID thing, I honestly don't know what's going to happen to movies as an industry. I don't know if it's going to be able to recover after this because it's, I mean, such a huge blow. But assuming that it does recover, I mean, I would like them. I would like to see them look video games, for example. I think that's movies are sort of becoming like video games in the sense that you have like these big franchises and they keep making movies that are part of this franchise. But
Oh,
uh but on the other hand, in video games you do get a lot of original IPs as well, and a lot of them are really good and original. And even the movies that are, even the games that are part of a franchise, they tend to innovate and to be pretty different and to be self-contained at times as well. And so I think it's just movies are trying, it's almost like they're trying to be like video games, like making these huge franchises that make a lot of money, but and that they're safe for from a production standpoint, but they're not doing it right. You know, if you're gonna do like a big franchise, yeah, that's fine, but you gotta, you know, you gotta keep making good movies. And I think a movie has to feel like it's its own adventure. Like you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is probably not a great example because it's the first one, but then when we, you know, we're gonna watch the second and the third and even the fourth, and yeah, they're Indiana Jones movies, but they're self-contained. You know, they're their own story, and they're still like a movie that you can watch. If I showed you the second Indiana Jones movie, it doesn't really matter that you haven't seen the first one. I mean, it's just an adventure that, you know, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I think that that is important. You know, if not, I mean, we could just watch TV shows, which is fine. But movies shouldn't really feel like TV shows, I think.
yeah, I agree. I think there's still something special about being able to watch a movie and appreciate it and intake an entire story in a
Yeah,
shorter amount of time.
yeah, it should be its own thing.
Right? It feels more like you said, a different beginning, middle, and end. Whereas I think a lot of premium television these days is more designed to be like a slow, continuous drip of satisfaction.
Yeah, but yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about. I don't know if you knew this, but this was a movie that it's kind of an interesting movie because from the production side of things, because it was actually it was George Lucas' idea. So it's a very special movie because, you know, and Lucas and Spielberg, they've been friends their whole lives, and they helped each other a lot. But this movie was actually George Lucas' idea, but then he kind of got Steven Spielberg to direct the movies because he didn't actually want to direct them because he was doing like the Star Wars stuff.
Right.
So it's really a movie that is made by Spielberg and Lucas, like the biggest blockbuster directors in the history of Hollywood. So they both like made this movie together, all the Indiana Jones movies together. So I think that's like really interesting
Yeah, I
because,
mean, it's definitely two big names on the bill.
yeah, and it shows, man. It's like the perfect blockbuster, really.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes off as more of a Spielberg flick than a George Lucas movie.
You think it looks more like a Spielberg movie than a George
Yeah,
Lucas?
I definitely think so. Um,
Okay.
just with
Well, in what sense? Just like the style, you mean?
yeah, especially like directing style.
Hmm.
Um, I think George Lucas for me is always going to be synonymous with Star Wars. So I'm
Yeah.
never going to be able to unsee things like the sweeping transitional effects.
Yeah. It's like basically like what's her name? The Harry Potter writer,
Okay,
J.K.
right.
Rowling in Harry Potter. It's kind of like, he created that universe. He's the guy that created that universe.
Right.
Or Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings. That's that's maybe even better because George Lucas is basically the Tolkien of movies, but except Star Wars is not really fantasy, but it's like a sci-fi fantasy.
The space opera.
Yeah, space opera. But yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about concerning Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Um, I mean, as far as like what else I would have wanted out of it, I feel like a lot of my critiques aren't really fair for a movie that came out in the 80s. Um, like there are a lot of tropes about it that I really don't. That I guess were just like eye rolling. Um, like with the damsel in distress being just that,
Uh-huh.
right? Like she's painted to be like this strong, self-sufficient woman, and then throughout the rest of the movie, after she joins up with Indy, like she doesn't do anything other than you know get captured by Nazis.
Yeah, I agree, but that first scene is pretty badass. I love that first scene.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I think it's disappointing to have this character introduced in such a strong, inspiring way, where you're like, oh man, can't wait to see this bad bitch like bash some Nazis, and then she doesn't do anything in the rest of the movie.
The only thing that she did, it's kind of a weird scene actually, because but it's also a cool scene, not as cool as the first one, but she does drink the French guy under the table.
Yeah,
But it's
she,
kind of weird then because she just grabs the knife like that, and
yeah, she just grabs him. She's like, I got a knife.
what are you
Like,
gonna do with that knife? It's kind of a weird scene.
like I was really hoping that she was gonna grab it and then just stab him in the neck, but out of the blue, just out of absolute nowhere, right? Like that's what would have been a redeeming character trait for her to just
That's
become a character.
Ian's R-rated version of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, if I were to write it, I would have had her, you know, put back this entire bottle because she's faking being drunk because you see the first scene where she and that other dude are knocking back shots of whatever food she's drinking. Where were they, in the Himalaya mountains? So they're drinking some kind of whiskey, and she's like 8, 9, maybe 12 shots in, and like a few minutes later, she sobers up enough to clean up her bar and get in a fight with Indy over their sordid relationship. So like, when she's drinking that bottle of wine with the French guy in the tent, like that's not much to her liver. It's like
Yeah,
she was clearly doing it to get him drunk and
yeah,
incapacitated, and she hides the knife. And you're like, okay, she's really gonna fuck shit up with this knife, and then she doesn't. And then like the Dr. Jekyll dude with the coat and the burn on his hand comes in through the tent, and like she tries to like stab him from the side, and he just like passively catches her wrist and just like sit down. So
yeah.
I was really disappointed with that scene in
It's
particular.
definitely, yeah.
Like that was her one chance to be like a badass, and it just got completely blown. And then she just goes back to being a helpless damsel in distress.
Yeah, it's disappointing. It's a very good start, but then yeah, the whole knife thing doesn't really make a whole lot shit, a whole lot of sense. And then she gets basically just put down by the Nazi guy, who's like, the Nazi guy is not the most threatening of guys either. That's kind of a weird choice because he's like this little man. Um it's
Yeah,
kind
with
of,
a shitty hairline.
yeah, Fraulein. It's not. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a very non-menacing villain for being a Nazi. But no movie's perfect. But I mean, it's still a really good movie, even though it has some imperfections.
yeah. So I guess that was my big complaint with the movie.
And to be honest with you, and this is actually not a super popular opinion, I don't think, but I actually like 2 and 3 better. I like the second Indiana Jones and the third Indiana Jones better.
Well, I haven't seen them yet, so
Yeah, but I'm excited to see them with you.
I get the feeling that the damsel in distress situation won't improve.
The damsel in distress situation. To be honest, I don't remember all that. Um, I don't think a girl is very important in the third movie. I don't think there's a female character is very important. I don't remember. It's more about Indiana Jones and his dad, the third movie. Um, and then the second one, there's definitely another girl. It's not the girl from the first movie. I don't know why they changed the girl. It's definitely like a James Bond thing.
Sure.
You have the adventure, and he has lots of girlfriends all around the world. I think they wanted to go with that vibe. So the second one has a different girl, a different Jones girl. She's actually, you know who she is? I think she's the girl from Sex and the City, like the
Miranda?
Samantha. I think, like the
Samantha.
the blonde woman. You know?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Samantha.
Yeah, Samantha, right? The older one.
Let me see here. Still got the heads.
I think it's Samantha, the older one. I
The
mean,
little birdie is telling me yes.
we started doing a podcast about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we end up talking about Sex and the City. Something wrong here.
Karen Allen.
Yeah, something like that. I think she's one of the four anyways. Like she's the blonde one. She's the blonde older chick. I think she's older than the other three, if I'm not mistaken. And she's the girl in Indiana Jones. And I think she's also the female part in another movie that we gotta watch at some point. I don't know if you've seen that one, but Little Trouble in Big China. No, Big Trouble in Little China, something like that.
Uh, I have a vague recollection of watching this movie, but
Dude, we
definitely
gotta
watch
we
that.
gotta we gotta watch. If anything good comes out of this podcast, is you watching Big Trouble in Little China and Indiana Jones.
All right, we'll definitely watch it. We can do that one next.
That one is a great movie. Kurt Russell movie. That's a beautiful movie. So yeah, man. Um, yeah. So we'll do more of these,
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
and I think this is a good
Good
first
stopping point
episode for talking movies,
for sure.
and we'll be talking about lots of cool movies from the '80s, the '90s, the '70s, the 2000s.
Yeah, I think we should try and do the Matrix trilogy.
Yeah, a lot of cool movies, and we're gonna be talking about them and making friends on YouTube. Right, Ian?
Perfect. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, anything else you want to say?
I don't think so, man. I think that covers it.
All right, I agree. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and